Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brandt, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes here. Of course, first one of 2024. Last time we recorded, my friend, was December 18th, and so much has happened since then. I've been kicked out of the house, got 2 arrests. Anyway, how was your Christmas and New Year's?
It was pretty good. It was nice. Obviously, for both of us, a lot of family time, a lot of time with kids, things like that. So making the podcast a little difficult, but
Unfortunately.
it was a really good time. It was a good time. Good reset. And then we obviously, I think when we recorded on the 18th, we said maybe be this INEOS deal would be wrapped under the Christmas tree and Christmas Eve. It was nice to finally get that confirmation announcement and everything that came with that. And over the next few days, that was something to break up the holidays and read all about and start digging into.
What do you think they announced on Christmas Eve?
I think that it's an interesting thing because I think that this is again a type of thing. As soon as it was ready, they have to announce it. They can't really sit on it. I think they did want to announce it as soon as possible. I think that they were really concerned about it going into the Christmas period and New Year without getting done. Um, there's a lot of, as we dive into the agreement itself, there's a lot of, I mean, this was incredibly complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It was really difficult even to get done in the state that it got done was, I think part of it required them just pushing it to a vote, even with some people not present, according to some articles and things like that. So I think that was part of it. It was just, I think, Jim and the Glazers probably just said, let's just get this done now. We got to get this over with because this could go on interminably with some of the challenges that they faced if they didn't just push it through at some point in time.
Inevitably, when you look at the SEC disclosure, and there's a lot in there that's way
Yep.
over my head, but some of the things that people were looking for, James, was is there a pathway to ownership enshrined in writing? Now, I'm not 100% sure if I'm on sound footing on this, but from what I can understand, is that it wasn't legal to put that in writing where you're still a publicly traded company because it removes
Right.
risk from the stock going up and down,
Yep.
there's legal complications about that, about enshrining that in writing.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I could tell from talking to some people who were some of the people who actually kind of broke the stories, around the Financial Times and things like that, just chatting with them, essentially that's what it looked like was just that, um, they couldn't do it in the end. It was just it didn't make sense for them to be able to put that kind of agreement in place when it comes to the minority shareholders and all of that. Generally speaking, it's hard to justify legally giving someone a guaranteed right to buy something in the future because as a minority shareholder, what if a better offer comes? This is part of the issue that goes into all of it. You have to even think about what if, you give Jim an option for 35 a share at, this date and someone comes in with 40. Well, what happens to that option? How does that work? How does this, it's so complicated. And even having that price in the future affects things like, affects things like the share price, all of it. It's just really, really complex is essentially what it all was. And the holdup continued to be these minority shareholder concerns, basically to the point where, as I believe it, they had to essentially strip out any sort of guaranteed option in the future just to get this deal legally over the line. And obviously we wish that wasn't the case, but
Because it
it seems
seems
like it was.
that if Ratcliffe is successful, it's going to be harder to get them out. Because it would seem to me that in that situation, United would also be commercially successful, obviously, and the price of getting them out will go up. They're going to be even more reluctant sellers if United are performing well commercially. And so, for them, if it fails, they're getting paid anyway. It seems to me that from a Jim Ratcliffe perspective, I'm a bit skeptical. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic about the whole thing, but I'm a bit skeptical that his success will lead to their removal.
Well, yeah, it is tricky. It's hard to it's hard because there's no guarantees, obviously. There's no guarantees in all this. That being said, there's a couple of important things that are in this agreement that I think are worth evaluating. The Athletic did a review of everything, one of their guys recently, and his takeaway was kind of the same as mine, which is yes, there's nothing guaranteed in there, but there is a lot of framework for a deal. There's a lot of framework for a deal that would allow for and encourage essentially, Jim Ratcliffe or somebody else to buy the club over the next 12 to 24 months. There's a lot of incentive to do that, and there's a lot of things in place that would allow that to happen. And that's kind of my conclusion from it as well, is that, it's the Glazers. So, what are you going to do? Say about it. But I think the couple things that are telling are this. They were amenable to an option, and in fact, even had agreed to put an option in there. They had already agreed to a sale to Jim Ratcliffe of a majority stake back in May that they could not overcome the legal challenges on, that they brought to a vote, that they all voted yes on. Those are matters of truth. And so I think when you look at the Glazers in general, they're not quite these like cartoon villain-esque people. They're simply sort of your ultra-capitalist individuals who have an ownership of a club that they don't particularly care about in a sense that they should, or in a way that they should, and want to maximize on their return on it. However, you also have to factor in, what does that really mean? I mean, one could hold on to it for 20 years and probably it'll be worth 15 billion in the future with inflation, with the rise in football and all that, maybe. But do they need to do that for 20 more years when Avram Glazer will be almost in his 90s by then? That doesn't particularly make sense if he's still around. Those are considerations that come into play with all of this. And I think that it's well set up for this deal to be kind of duplicated in a sense that would allow the Glazers to cash in maybe a little more, $33 a share today, $35 in a year from now, to cash in. And the only thing that I would add to that is when you look at the overall valuation that this is given, and especially given that they also diluted a little bit with Jim Ratcliffe's investment of 200 million plus 100 by the end of this year, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That valuation that Jim Ratcliffe is offering them was about $1 billion more than the only other offer on the table. So who else is going to be there that they sell it to? That's going to offer more. There is no guarantee that there's anybody else who's going to come close to offering the type of money that Jim Ratcliffe is offering for this club, for the Glazers. And I think that is a consideration in all of this. And I think he certainly overpaid when you compare it to the fact that there's nobody else even close to making an offer at that level, because he wants the club. And that's the good part, I guess.
One of the questions that I have is, how do they marry two different ideologies, make them functionable, make them symmetrical, and make them an adjuvant of each other so that United perform on the pitch? Everything inside the football club, in my opinion, should be the first principle of getting the best football team possible on the pitch and define ourselves by winning trophies, which is what our competition does. That United haven't had that. All of a sudden, you're asking this football club to find a happy medium between these two very different ideologies that stand in opposition to each other. Because I think if you look at how the Glazers have run the football club over the last 10 years, everything has been derivative of their first priority, which is making sure they're commercially successful. That is the most important thing. And if you look at teams that try to finish in the top four and have that as a goal, here's one of the problems with that goal, in my opinion. You are immediately telling players that losing games is acceptable.
Right.
Not terminal to the goal. Okay. And once you put that mentality inside a football club that says it's okay if we lose this week because we can recover next week, you're going to miss the target occasionally. So, you see this with Spurs and other teams that will have one decent season and a really bad season, one decent season and a really bad season. When they have a good season, they just try to maintain. They don't try to progress. And inevitably, they miss the target occasionally. Now you're going to try to get people in there that's going to say, okay, the only acceptable metric of success for us is winning trophies. If you look at City have sacked Pellegrini and Mancini over the last 10 years, both for winning a league, neither of which was enough to keep their job. We've talked about this in this podcast before. Any United manager in the last 10 years who would have finished in the top four, they'd still be there, right? So how all of a sudden do you now get a football club that says everything inside here? And I know that Jim Ratcliffe and the INEOS, who don't, by the way, it needs to be said, have a perfect record in sports, right? I mean, I was looking at some of the Sky cycling stuff with Dave Brailsford and what have you, and it's not glittering. Let me put it like that. Even the Americans, their yachting team, and they're not exactly they're definitely better than what we have, but they're far from perfect. But to become Premier League champions, the whole football club has to change culturally everywhere. And that means every single department inside that football club has to have a very clearly defined success metric, and every resource inside the club has to be poured towards sport and success. And I don't know how you do that with owners that are the majority owners that still don't share that goal.
Yeah, it is tricky. I mean, some of it is a bit of an ideological view of what it takes to win that I guess we're going to find out a bit about, because United, with the sporting control very clearly and legally defined when it comes to INEOS, having complete control over really everything. I mean, at the end of the day, football is about personnel, coaches, staff, players, and what they do and who they are, and whether you get the right people in or not. And I guess when you look at it, you say, if that is segmented the way that it's supposed to be, and if United should have essentially the largest budget possible, which they should, comparatively, they should have a budget that, I mean, look, it's not like they haven't spent money. They've spent the most on transfers and the most on wages. So we know that that's probably going to continue in this circumstances, or it can continue under the same kind of setup. If that continues and they have equivalent of the most money in the Premier League or up there, they should be able to do effectively the same thing that anybody would want. I mean, if you take...
Can I just interrupt for a second? One of the reasons why United spend the money that they do is a reflection of their ineptitude, and also, for me, a reflection of the fact that they don't invest in other resources inside the football club to prevent that type of overspending. What you would do is you would have a director of football with actionable responsibilities. And say, okay, we're going, instead of spending 100 million this summer, we're going to give you 20 million for your department, so that because if you're a director of football and you want to be competitive in the youth market, that is a whole market in itself. You can't have somebody grow into that job, right? That is every football club around the world wants the next Lionel Messi at 16. So it's really, really, really competitive, and it's something you have to do every single day. You have to have incredible contacts. You have to have very actionable responsibilities. You have to be funded properly. You have to go and get the best people, and then you can avoid spending 100 million or 85 million on Anthony, because you have proper scouting, proper contingency, proper stocked academy, all that stuff. And you have, United are looking at this kid in Ecuador. We'll get into that. It is Zambrano, but for years, United haven't funded those departments properly, so they haven't functioned properly. And then you see that consequence at the top end. So now you would have to say, in order to avoid that, you're going to have to hire exceptional people, but also make sure these departments are funded with very, very, very clear, precise goals. This is what's going to get you sacked. This is what's going to mean your success.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the things that the thing about it is, you tweeted something to this effect, and it's the truth. This is what my view on the Glazers has always been. That's why I say I don't see them in this villainous sense in the same way. I see them simply people who want a lot of money and they make the wrong decisions. And for the football club, they make the wrong decisions for the success. What INEOS have to do is what the Glazers could have done this whole time.
Yeah, no, I know.
They could have said, let's get a CEO whose focus is football. And that's what they're going to focus on, their football success. And let's give them the power to do everything that they need to do. Because that's how you run any business, any department. You have to delegate responsibility and powers to the people who are in the job, on the job. And there has to be clear focuses on what is success, what is failure, what are the goals, what are we trying to accomplish. Well, we know the goal for Manchester United. It has to be the top team in Europe. It has to be. That has to be the goal. Anything less than that is unacceptable. That's where they have to aim. So we can set that clear target. But yeah, INEOS have to do the same thing that the Glazers could have done in order to be successful with this. I don't want to see them involved in every single decision. That's not the point. They shouldn't be, because they're not necessarily the experts. Dave Brailsford is a very smart guy. He's not the football expert. And they made a lot of mistakes with Nice for a few years, being too involved in a sense. And you can have good intentions and make the same mistakes by not setting up the best people to make the best decisions, to do the best things, with a clear guide to what is success and what is failure. And so that is absolutely what they have to do. And that's why I think it can work with the control. They have to delegate it properly also. They have to be the ones to say, good, we've got a CEO, we've got these directors in, we're going to give them their money, we're going to give them their budget that they have, and they've got to pull it off. They have to accomplish what they have to accomplish, and we have to have, consequence for failure. And we have to set clear and exceptional targets. And obviously, they're probably used to doing this in general business. You have to translate it to football, but the same concept applies. The same thing applies that it would to, what makes their businesses successful, so long as they understand that they're not the people who know football better than anybody else. And I think they do. I think hopefully they've learned from some of the things at Nice. They've set things up really well now, where they've taken a step back from overly interfering in how the club is run and given a real director of football responsibility and power, who's done a lot with it, a real coach. They've set a clear direction. They've got to do the same thing for United, and there might be bumps along the way, but the success of it, I think, has less to do with now the Glazers and more to do with if they properly set this structure up and give it the power and the resources that it needs. And if they do that, then we have as good a chance as anyone to win, as good a chance as Liverpool to win, as good a chance as Arsenal, as good a chance as anybody to make it happen. And that's what I'm optimistic about from everything that I've heard, at least from the start on this. But that's what's going to be the proof of whether this is a successful venture or not.
You can already see the INEOS effect with how United have gone about their January transfer window, which has largely been a window so far where they're clearing out players that should have been moved on, let's be honest, years ago. Donny van de Beek, I think United tried to move him on December 31st. I think it was, what is it? It's the first in Sydney. Can he go yet? It's
yeah, pretty much. We've changed our clocks to New Zealand time. Can we send him on our way?
3 years stay in Sydney. The window must be open. Get him out there. No, really, really. I think about Van de Beek a lot, and I think about a player. Was there ever a player at United where he was so forgiven for so long, where I kept thinking he'll come good, and Ten Hag came in and thought, if it doesn't work for him now, it never will. But then I sat and thought about it the other day. I'm like, can I remember a single good game that he had for United? I can't.
I can barely remember a game he actually played.
He was obviously someone that Solskjaer didn't want. I think COVID had something to do with his signing. I think the fact that Villa stayed up that year, United probably want the Grealish and
Fresh.
I was hearing someone talk about this the other day. It might have been Laurie Whitwell, actually, who's exceptional, by the way. And so I think that he was refreshing my memory and some of that stuff with Van de Beek, and it was pretty obvious from the outset that Solskjaer never really wanted him. It just didn't work. I wish him all the best. I hope it works out for him. Palestri, United were going to move on in the summer, ended up not because of the injury to Ahmad. I was on a podcast right before Christmas and I said, I don't think Palestri will ever be good enough for Manchester United. I don't see enough of all the times I've seen him, and I'm going to go back to Van de Beek. Been some decent moments from Palestri, and I know not everyone agrees with me on this, but I can't remember a game where I've really thought, wow, this kid, really is good enough for United. I'm excited about what I see here. So I think it's appropriate that they move him on. The big one is obviously Jadon Sancho. We'll talk about Rafael Varane and a couple of others in a minute. But Jadon Sancho, it's a no-lose deal for United. One, he goes back to a place where he will have happy memories from psychologically. It'll reinvigorate him because he'd want to go back to a place where he was at peak performance. He knows the league. He'll be confident he can go in there, hit the ground running. It's not another risk to another Premier League club where you're not sure if it's going to work out. If Jadon Sancho has any chance of getting back to the player that he was before he came to Manchester United, this is the right move for him. If he can perform well for the next 4 to 5 months, I still think United will look to sell him. Because ultimately, the rule that he broke has nothing to do with Ten Hag. That has to be a club rule because it can't be conditional upon the manager as to whether you have tolerance for what time you show up to training at. George Best wasn't allowed to do this. Eventually that got him kicked out. If you go to the Beckham documentary when he was made to train on his own by Capello ended up bringing him back into the squad because of how well he was training on his own. Right. So to me, I think the rule that Jadon Sancho broke, there can never be a time at United when it's okay to break that rule.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's two different real aspects to this whole thing. There's one that I think that the whole situation was I don't think anybody from the outside would be happy with it because the way that it ended up was the worst possible outcome from a club perspective. When you look at it from top end management, you cannot have an asset who is essentially worthless. You just can't. You got to avoid it at all costs. Not to take blame away from the player because being late, the issues that he's had, those are totally on him. But at the end of the day, you still don't want to have you still don't want to have a worthless, essentially from a value perspective, I'm talking asset that you can't do anything with, that's taking huge wages. And it was really dealt with poorly in that respect. And I think that would be one area where proper leadership would have stepped in to resolve it differently in the end. Not saying the player's going to have to play for the manager or anything like that. Like, it's not like you've got to play him, you got to start him. I'm not talking that, but there is a difference in how it could be resolved where his value doesn't go to absolutely nothing. And hopefully this loan is the start of fixing that from a management perspective. Then, as you said, I see it as totally a win-win situation if he performs well, which I think he will at Dortmund, right? If he goes back to Dortmund, he goes back to Germany, and he performs well, either you can sell him to somebody and get a return, or you think he's fixed up, we've resolved this situation, can he return as a Premier League player? Maybe either one. I'm not saying which nobody knows what the future will hold in that respect, but it gives a lot of flexibility for the options there for the future and what could happen, down the line. It'll be interesting to see, I guess, from an INEOS perspective. And I'm not talking about like player mistakes and things, but I'd be interested to see if there's any sort of moratorium essentially that they give on some of these players, because there's a lot of players who feel that there's been broken promises over the years with United.
Personally, I wouldn't.
No, I understand, but there is.
Times, I'm sorry. Like, I mean, these are players that, in my opinion, need to ask themselves one question: not whether you want to play for the manager. Do you have the trust of the fans?
Yeah.
And these players have done this so many times. How many times are we going to keep giving them? Wait, yeah, it's not you, it's the manager. I know it was the manager before
No,
that.
no,
No,
no.
the manager before that. No, it was the manager before that.
That would apply.
This
That would
time
apply
it's going
to
to be different.
yeah. That would apply to everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so
It's
that's
more a
yeah,
matter
that's
of
what I mean.
yeah. It would have to. At the end of the day, though, the signs that I gather from the clear outs from the players they're looking to sell, I don't really see it that way. I see that their focus is on football, on the matter of who's going to perform the best and
Yeah.
where are you getting the best value for money in the squad. They're
Mhm.
looking at obviously moving on Casemiro. It's already been commented on that was one of the transfers brought up, by back in March last year when they first visited and all of that it was a disaster. And it's been in terms of the wages and it's not about cutting down costs. It's about value for money. You have to get the best value for money when you're building a team. If you have a machine that's very good, but incredibly expensive, and you can sell it and get two more that double your production output for the same cost, you're not cost cutting. You're making proper decisions. And that's really, as far as I can see, that's what they're looking at. They're going to want people who want to be there 100% and who are there for the long haul on the project. I know you don't like the word project, but on what they're trying to accomplish here. I mean, at the end of the day, my point being, they do want people who are here for 4 or 5 years, because one of the things United have tried to do over and over and over and over again under the Glazers is cheat. They cheat on the rebuild. They cheat on actually building a proper team, and they try to skip it by buying players like Rafael Varane when it didn't make sense, by bringing in Cristiano Ronaldo when it didn't make sense, by bringing in Casemiro when it isn't what they needed for the long run. And they cannot cheat this rebuild, essentially, or this rehash of the whole squad. They've got to clear it out and actually put in people with longevity, players who have longevity at the club. I think more than anything, you need players you can rely on to be here for a long time. And how many years have we had strikers who are, next year we're going to need another striker, next year we're going to need a new striker? It's endless, and
What
it's
does it
pretty
remind you of,
impossible.
though?
What's that?
What does it remind you of? I made a joke about this, but it's legit, right? This reminds you of every guy's Christmas shopping. Leaves it to the last minute, right?
Yeah.
Didn't plan properly, ends up overpaying for shit they don't want, right?
Yep.
Stuff they don't need, and they repeat this process ad nauseum. And the people that prepare properly, that know exactly what they want, why they want it, who they want it for, and they're planning months ahead, they get what they want, right?
Yep.
They don't pay what you pay. They don't have the problems you have. They're not running around. What did they make in the last day of the window? 4 or 5 signings this summer.
Yeah.
They're not doing this stuff. And this is the Ferguson said this once. You can always tell the football clubs that are really poorly run. They're the ones that are trying to do all that business in the last day of the window, because there is no foresight, and so inevitably you find yourself in this situation. So maybe we need a female director of football.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is why women don't do this. No.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, look, for Chelsea, they had Marina. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, right? But she did a great job with them, with buying, selling, doing the things that they needed doing.
If you need a striker and a centre back, you get a Louis Vuitton purse. I didn't say no. I'm too stupid. Some of the other potential departures, Rafael Varane. What do you think of that?
I think that it's going to depend on the manager, which is why it's open-ended at the moment. The way that it's been stated out there that he's not committed. This is a complicated situation. I think I said a while back, and this gets into a really complicated area when it comes to the squad, and which is why I think they're more trying to not make too many long-term decisions today. You can't go to Rafael Varane and say, we might have a different manager next year who might want to play you more, so stick around and sign a new contract. You can't have that conversation. If he is willing to accept lower wages and stay, it would be helpful in that you don't know how many center backs you're going to have to buy next year, which is why they did the +1 option on Victor Lindelof. Because you have Lisandro Martinez, who's had 2 foot surgeries. Harry Maguire, who is always often unquestionable, but probably in the long term not up to the level that you need. And you have Rafael Varane, who's out of contract and can sign with anybody else in 6 months. Having to buy 3 or 4 center backs this summer could be problematic. It's going to be a problem for any sort of rebuild, any sort of squad building in general. You can't have so much overhaul in one summer. It can cause complete instability in the team itself. But it's a really complicated situation, I think, in that respect. He's not happy with his role in the team. That's what's been the case for some time now. And and that's fair enough. He feels he could go somewhere where he would be the first choice, and that he's keeping his options open for that. He doesn't want to go to Saudi. I think he wants to stay in Europe and contribute in Europe. He maybe wants to go back to France, where he's from. I think he's mentioned that before. Might be the next sort of final step in his career. But it's a tricky situation. I think it's okay if United move on from him. I think it's okay. I think it's okay if he accepts lower wages and stays for a couple years. If it's okay that he's not going to be necessarily always the first choice center back. It's kind of going to be up to him, but it's a tricky one because it's with a lot of players like this who are in that kind of middle ground. It's going to come down to stuff with the manager and long-term plans and what their role will be and all of that as it gets closer to summer. But that is a really tricky thing to talk about right now, because it's not like anything's been 100% decided. But as we all kind of know, there's a sincere possibility that Ten Hag isn't the manager next year. And how does that affect things?
I thought it was interesting when Ten Hag first came into United. He, kept Harry Maguire as captain, which was essentially saying that my starting two centre-back pairing was Maguire and Martinez.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Maguire gets dropped after the Brentford game. Brighton game, Brentford game. And Varane takes his place. But first season Varane was at United, he missed half the Premier League games because of injury. I think the second one, it was the same.
Yep.
And I don't see that getting any better as he gets older. I think that Ten Hag has always had reservations about Varane in some sense. Because once you name Maguire your captain, that you plan on starting your captain. Maguire played his way out of the team rather than Varane playing his way in. But I think that Galatasaray game where United conceded 3, I thought he was really poor in that game. He comes on against FC Copenhagen, Johnny Evans goes off, and then United concede 4. Now, I'm not saying it's his fault, but I look at him and going, good defender when he's fit, but he's not fit enough. And I actually remember his first game was away to Wolves, and I remember at the end of that game, the look on his face because of the intensity and the pace of the Premier League. I think at the time the same Varane was before he went to Real Madrid, not as a 29-year-old with an injury record, leaving Madrid on massive wages. So for me, I think, one, if Varane doesn't like his place where he's at right now, I don't see that improving next season. I think if United go out and sign centre-backs next season, it has to be to start every week. So why would you keep a guy on massive wages on the bench that isn't happy? These are the types of decisions you need to move on from and say, okay, you know what? It's okay. You can leave and have more foresight into having a long-term replacement that can start every week. Look at how much, I don't think this helps Onana either, about how much United rotate in their back line. It's far too often. I think they picked the same back 4 twice this whole season. So that's something that absolutely has to improve going forward. They have to have consistency in the back 4. And the most important part of the back 4 we have to have consistency is in the back 2. And I don't mind Lindelof getting a contract extension as a backup centre-back, but certainly not as a starting centre-back.
Yeah, and my understanding of the plan, at least as I gather, regarding the center backs, with the triggering of Lindelof, I believe that what they want is and expect is that Varane will leave. And I don't think there's any disagreement with that. Like I said, I could see him staying on a backup and things like that, but I'm not sure that's what he wants anyway, because that's essentially his complaint as of now. But I don't believe that they're going to guarantee him, oh yeah, you're going to be the first choice center back and all of that. They didn't take up his option. They obviously want to allow him to go. What I believe they would like to do is allow Rafael Varane to leave. Gives them the ability to assess Lisandro Martinez over the rest of the season. They have Victor Lindelof. They have Harry Maguire, who is a professional, who has maintained a positive mentality if he's going to be not the first choice center back next year. He's someone who has shown a willingness to compete for it without, downing tools or throwing a strop or anything like that. And I think that's commendable from him. From what I understand, right now, I would expect the plan is to let Varane go and pursue a first choice center back. Some of the names like Antonio Silva, obviously talked about Todibo at Nice and other names that have come up. And then over the next 2 summers or over the next couple windows, get another center back in as well. So you have 3 or 4 really good center backs in the club. But I would say I very strongly expect that Rafael Varane will leave and they will buy a fairly significant new center back for his position.
Do you see any other
that's most likely
in January?
In January, probably not. I mean, yeah, if an offer comes in, but that continues to be the problem, isn't it?
That's 7 million from Fenerbahce, isn't that real?
I don't think so. I don't think that they've made any offer on that. There's some good reporters from Turkey. I think United, if someone offered them 7 million for Martial, he'd be out quicker than Van de Beek.
I'd take him before the ayahuasca wears off. We're here.
Yeah, right. Are you kidding me? Yeah, a fee? I don't know. I don't think United could get a fee for him. One of the positives, I think, in some respect, potentially, is the Saudi league voted to increase the number of foreign players that they're bringing in. The problem is you're seeing players come back who didn't really enjoy their experiences for one reason or another. I don't know. Maybe the money wasn't enough for some of the trade-off for being,
contracts.
Yeah, I know. Easy. Yeah, no one's buying you back into Europe, that's for sure. And so I don't know if that is a possibility or not, because Casemiro, there's big interest in him from Saudi as well. I think he'd be more open to it. Martial, I don't know. I don't really know in that respect, but I think that's really the only potential route for him out. The difference between someone like Martial and someone like Fred, for example, who went to Turkey is, Fred was a free agent. And as I understand it, he didn't care too much about the money on the wages that he was going to get. He also got a nice payoff.
Well,
no, he wasn't a free agent. He had the +1, right? Excuse me. He had the +1, but he wasn't on big wages. Martial's on 250,000 a year.
His contract's up at the end of the season too.
Yeah, so. Just let it go. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. I don't see that they could get any money for him. I think it's going to be a wash. They're either going to have to pay those wages out or not, and so it's like he's here or he's not. I think makes a little difference. I think he'll just be gone in summer.
Here's my concern, James, right, is that one, United squad needed strengthening regardless of any outgoings in January.
Yeah.
So they got rid of some fringe players, which is fine. That doesn't tell me that the squad is stronger at the end of January than what it was at the beginning. So, we're being told that FFP is an impediment for recruitment. Some rumors suggesting that it'll be an offer some different strikers. I believe Karim Benzema is out of contract. Choupo-Moting was someone that's been offered to United. What do you see United doing in terms of forwards in January?
Honestly, not much. I mean, this is a tricky situation. There was some contact with Werner, but they never really followed that up. It has to be a loan. I mean, I do not think they will sign a single permanent player in January. I think
listen to this
question. What's that?
Listen to this stat, and Erik Ten Hag has signed more loan players than what United have signed on loan in the last 25 years.
Yeah, I believe that.
So when you look at how often he's being asked to dip into the loan market, and when you dip into the loan market, you're not talking about top players. You're talking about players that are
Yeah,
on the fringes that are
sure.
not good enough that other clubs don't want. The Odi and the Gallo stuff, Solskjaer had to lean on contacts to make that happen. You look at all these, emergency loans. How many of them ever work out? I mean, I
Yeah,
get Henrik Larsson, maybe
yeah.
Ferguson did, but I can't remember the last time you got an emergency loan that actually went, okay, this guy's top class. This guy's, I mean, a goal did all right, I suppose,
He
but
did all right for the time being, for a short time that it was
yeah,
there.
but you feel that United still need another striker.
Yeah, you do. You do. I mean, it's a problem. The goal scoring is an issue, and I don't see it resolving that much. This is tricky. I mean, I would love to be positive about the whole thing, but the reality is, I think that we all have to face is that the season's a bit of a waste at this point in time. I mean, I don't think it has to be a total waste. I'm not saying that it should necessarily be, but you can understand the problem that is encountered in all of this. Like we talked about at the end of last summer, which was the truth as it came out in the end. Here we are 6 months later, that the way that they were making financial decisions, the Glazers, was essentially, hey, we're getting a minority investor coming in and we're cleaning the books up and we're cutting the spending down to absolutely nothing. And we're going to free up as much money as possible. And I think that it continues to be the plan for January up until the summer. And it's okay because it is really challenging. I would not like to see them make any sort of permanent signing that hinders things later. We've done that too many times as well. I mean, you look at the options there. Amrabat has not been a success. It's a good thing they didn't buy him permanently in the end. They sent Reguilon back. I think to free up a loan spot is probably part of it. So I just don't see much. I mean, maybe a lone striker comes in or somebody that they could take a punt on, that maybe they look at for a veteran presence that they could sign permanently next year. I think that would be part of it, is they'd like, if they get a loan in, they'd like to get somebody that could come into the window for a cheap cover signing for permanent. Ideally, something like that. So I honestly don't know. I don't know if anything happens this month in terms of in. I really don't.
I think over the Christmas period, which was United's worst December since 1930, I believe, the
Mm.
goal scoring record is just abysmal. It's indefensible. Um, and inevitably, this brings up conversations about Anthony. And
Mm.
I don't like turning on United players. And for anyone that listens to my podcast will know, for a significant part of last season, I defended Anthony and felt there was a player that he would improve, that his decision making would improve. I found myself becoming really, really angry at his performances over the last few weeks, and I was looking back at some of United's decent wins. They scored 4 or 3 away to Copenhagen. He wasn't playing. They scored 3 away to Everton. He wasn't playing. I believe the United would never have come back against Aston Villa if he was
Not a
playing.
chance.
And I think that United just look a much better team without him. I was doing a podcast over Christmas with Franz Hoke, and Franz actually hosted that podcast on Zoom, so don't blame me. But I tried to press record as a not as a host, as a guest, and he has to actually give permission. He gives permission about halfway through the podcast, so I lost a bunch of it. But we were talking about Anthony anyway, and I was asking him about why he feels he's failed, and he goes, honestly, I feel that if Eric was in his second season at United, he wouldn't have made that signing, because I think one of the things that is impossible to anticipate before you go to United is the type of scrutiny and pressure you face off the pitch,
Mm.
on the pitch. It's like he would have known this in the second season, and there was certainly question marks about Anthony and how certain things affect him off the pitch. Don't
Yeah.
affect everyone the same. Certain players can handle different things. We're all built differently. And he goes, if you haven't done it by your second season at a big club, it almost never happens. And that's usually the cutoff where they say, okay, no more. And he goes, I would be very surprised at this point if Anthony ever becomes a Manchester United player. I Like I said, I don't like picking on United players, but he infuriates me, James.
Yeah, he does. I don't know that there's been a player I get so angry watching, essentially because I think so often there's many moments in games where you could see exactly what he could do that he just won't. He just won't do it, and he can. I don't think he can. I just have to come to that conclusion that I just don't think he can. And it's not like even mistakes. It's just I've never. It's hard to see that one dimensional of a player, and in so many moments where there could be a difference being made, and yeah, it's an issue, and I don't think it's going to work out. I think there's practically no chance at this point that it works out for the long haul.
Oh, the brilliant Swedish Rumble done a fantastic long form tweet on how many clubs at the top level play with inverted wingers, and a lot do. The problem is, and there's a clip on my Twitter feed with Garnacho that shows he's willing to use both feet. So there's a level of unpredictability there. Garnacho's willing to, shoot with his left foot. He scores goals with his left foot. He's willing to score goals with his right foot. He put the ball across with his right foot. He put the ball into the box. He shoots. He scores a wide variety of goals. Even the people that were trying to defend Anthony by showing his clips in Holland the previous year were showing me the same goal, the same thing every single time. And I'm going, looking at what we know now, United scouts should have noticed this guy does the same thing every single time. Cuts in bottom corner, cuts in top corner,
Yeah.
And when you are playing as an inverted winger, there's very little space when you pick up the ball because it's a high compact area, right? You've got centre backs, you've got inverted fullbacks there. You have to be really quick, and he slows the counter attack down because the ball comes down the right hand side. He has to stop, pull the ball back, and then do a bunch of shimmies and do a bunch of feints and step overs. And you know that he's either going to cut inside and shoot or cross, but you know he's not going right.
Yeah.
There's a brilliant clip of Alphonso Davies just standing there watching and going, okay, let me know when you're going to go across me, onto my right-hand side, because I know that's when you're going. He tries it, and he just takes it off. I'm going, it's not a surprise to me that after his first 3 games, he's not scoring goals, because it looks like, to me, players have worked him out. This is a serious, serious problem for Ten Hag when you have a forward that now Luton Town are scoring more goals. And I honestly believe, and I've been a big defender of Ten Hag in this show, that if United weren't in the chaos they were in, he might have struggled to survive December.
Yeah. Fortunately, I'll say we won't see Anthony today. By the time this podcast is out, it won't be a spoiler, so it's okay. From spoiling the lineup earlier or anything like that. But we see in the front 3 versus Villa again today, which I think is encouraging because that was good. Garnacho, Rashford, Højlund. Hopefully, Garnacho on the right again. Hopefully, we see a nice game today. It is Rashford on the left again.
They have this ability to lower the standard of their play to the opposition, and this worries me.
I know. But let's see, because this was good. This was good against, Villa. They really showed up, let's hope. But as to your point on Ten Hag, yeah, I would agree with that. And one of the things I mentioned a long time ago that we've talked about, and I think sort of a final point on this, because this is where the question lies in the future, is aside from results, one of the biggest things that Ten Hag is going to have to accept is a change in his role, is a change in his powers at United. This has now come out from a couple of journalists. I think I said this some months ago that as far as I was hearing from the INEOS side, there were concerns about this, that he would not accept a change in his role. Some of it's in his contract, and that's a problem. That's a problem for him. It's a problem for everybody, but it's a problem for him because, yes, he has a veto in his contract. He's really had more influence than that. And I know that people will look at a veto and say it's not a big power, but it kind of is. Veto powers can be significant. De Zerbi over the weekend said about João Pedro, right? He scored a couple goals for them. He said he didn't even know who he was. Now, the problem when you have a manager who has a veto is if he doesn't know the player, he's not going to sign him. He's going to veto it, and he's going to pick someone that he's familiar with. That
So
has been a problem. Well, he should have. He should. He could have. Maybe.
Yeah, I know.
No,
Yeah,
no. But it's a.
yes.
You're always going to make mistakes in signing, right? You're always going to make mistakes in signing, but it still shouldn't be necessarily down to the manager. And you can find a lot of stories left and right. And I'm not putting the full blame on Ten Hag. He asked for a lot of these powers, probably because of what he'd seen and experienced about United, that's known about United's recruitment and these kind of
Let me
things.
ask you a quick question on that.
Yeah.
Because reading the piece that Laurie Whitwell did made me question whether Mason Mount was really someone that Eric Ten Hag really wanted. Because Ten Hag said something that I thought was a bit obscure. He said, oh yeah, he played against Ajax for Vitesse years ago, but that wasn't in my thinking. And actually, if you look at what Laurie was saying in that piece, it was John Murda trying to sell the merits of Mason Mount to Ten Hag. And Murda was obviously responsible for Casemiro. And then with this going, Hoyland was also someone that Murda had scouted quite a bit and done his research on. I'm going, how much is Mason Mount and Eric Ten Hag signing? Because Mason Mount was dropped, remember?
Yeah, well, to be fair, I believe that Mason Mount is someone that the club really liked. I've maintained that for a long time, that I think it's someone the club really liked as a player. That being said, I know for a fact that Eric Ten Hag flew himself to London to meet with Mason Mount before summer, to meet with him, to talk with him prior to the Chelsea game, to sort that deal out and get it lined up. So I know he gave a very full blessing. I know that for a 100% fact, by the way. I know he gave a 100% blessing on it. I wouldn't blame him for that. It's okay. It's fine. I don't have 100 total blame for Ten Hag on a lot of the things. I think Anthony is one that is so bad that it's so bad that you kind of can't argue it. But the point is still, regardless of who is at fault, the setup isn't working. And INEOS have come in, and their perspective has been from the start that these agreements that are in place are going to have to change. This setup isn't working. This isn't how it's going to be done here. And I've said for some time that I think that Ten Hag's going to have to accept it, or it's going to be a reason he loses his job at United. They will replace him. They will not accept this things to continue. And here's part of the problem. If you want to bring in people like Ashworth, Paul Mitchell, they're not going to sit there and say, oh, yeah, we're going to recruit. We're going to do all this work. We're going to find the best players for the team. And the manager just says no.
No, Ten Hag has worked within a system, and absolutely. And the system is built around Ten Hag. Ten Hag has to work around the system. Yep. And I completely agree with that. All right, we have Wigan up. By the time people download this podcast, we will already know the score of this. So what's your predictions for Wigan?
I think we'll win. I think we'll win. I think with the front three that's out there, I think we'll win. I think we'll score a couple goals today.
I think it was smart to make Onana stay and not give Bayindir. To me,
no.
If I'm Bayindir, if I'm United, and I'm saying I'm not going to play you against Wigan, 18th in League One, but we're going to throw you in the Premier League. I don't understand the wisdom of that. To me, Bayindir was Fenerbahce's #1 goalkeeper, the Turkish national team goalkeeper. If you're not going to play him against Wigan, when are you going to play him?
Yeah, I disagree with it for sure.
If Onana drops a clanger and you had to go into the cup, oh my God. So convincing Onana to stay and then he drops one in that. I'm telling you, like that's a big.
I disagree with it. I don't know what the point of buying a player is if you're not going to use him for Wigan. I mean, come on.
Makes me wonder, was Bayindir Ten Hag signing?
Honestly, who knows at this point?
Honestly, someone else. He has to do one. It wasn't Bayindir. It was someone else. I forget.
There was another name, but either way, at the end of the day, they approved him. They brought him in. You've got to put some. I mean, they were willing to play Bravka last year. It didn't go well, mind you. The game that he played, But if you're going to buy this young player, it was Suzuki. There's the other name that was up for goalkeeper. Zion Suzuki was the other name that was mentioned over summer. But I think they should have played him. Honestly, I think they should have played him. I really do. I think you should. If you're him at that point, you're looking at and saying, "Why am I here? If I can't get this game against Wigan when you're making a player extend where he's going to play like back-to-back days, why am I here?" It's very questionable for me.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. All right, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Folks, we'll be back every Monday. So thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast throughout 2023. We look forward to having a wonderful 2024 with all of you. And I'm sure this podcast will evolve as we go along. So thanks to each and every one of you for taking the time to support us. And let's hope you nearly get the win. So take it easy, mate. Cheers, James.
Yep, thanks, everybody. See you later.